With the assistance of Chris Minns and New South Wales Labor, the Radical Greens abortion bill has now passed the upper house of the New South Wales Parliament at close to midnight last night. What does this mean for us and how can we stop it? And that's today on the Dr. Joe Show. So before we get into the show today, if you could hit that subscribe button. If you're new here, welcome. The more people that support this channel, the more our movement grows. So you can probably hear from my voice, I'm a little bit croaky, a little bit exhausted. The bags are probably there because it's been a long 3 days ever since it was announced that Labor and the Greens had done a grubby political deal to ram this through the Parliament in 1 week, which was completely unprecedented for us. We had been told by Labor that they were going to not give this government time. That was the assurance they gave us, that this was a private member's bill. They weren't going to give it government time. They weren't going to prioritise it at all. And the minute Albanese won the election, all of those promises went out the window, and Chris Minns did a deal with Amanda Conn to ram this through the Parliament. And not only did they give it a little bit of government time, they gave it a lot of government time, prioritising it over all other areas of government business on Tuesday, 2 extra hours on Wednesday, and then all of Thursday, sitting right through to close to midnight to get this bill passed. So it has been a really full-on 3 days, and I think there's a lot to unpack. So I want to start by just speaking first of all about the amendments, what we managed to achieve, and then I'll move to where we go from here. So at the rally on Wednesday night, which was incredible, by the way, so all of you guys who supported it from afar, who actually came, and I know there were many of you guys who follow me on YouTube who actually came in from interstate, people coming from WA, from Cairns, from the NT, from Victoria, people driving up from Canberra. I met you guys and I was very blown away, actually, by the incredible turnout. 10,000 were there. That really, I think, was a tremendous sign of the depth of our movement. And we shut down Macquarie Street. The city was in gridlock. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to demand that people pay attention to us and take notice of us, because the other side gets the attention automatically. You know, they can hold a protest with like 15 people and the media will cover it. In fact, the counter protest, which the police did a very good job of keeping far away from us, it had like 40 people at most, and that's being generous. And yet on our side, we had thousands and thousands of passionate Australians. So it is interesting that the mainstream media didn't cover it. There was one article in the Daily Telegraph, a hit piece type article in news.com.au, and other than that, you know, the mainstream media channels didn't cover this. So that shows you the kind of depth of the challenge that we have in terms of breaking through and getting people's attention. But I think we really did do that on Wednesday night. Even if the mainstream media didn't cover it, we really pushed this out on socials. And the fact that we were able to get 10,000 there shows you just how we're building 2.5 years of doing this on social media, starting to connect in with other groups, and to get 10,000 is just incredible. And Sky has done a good job of showing some clips and telling Australians about the rally. But at this point, the mainstream media is, I think, just too scared to talk about us. They don't quite know what to make of us. So on that night at the rally, there was this moment where I received the news from parliamentarians in the chamber. I think I got this from Susan Carter via text message. And she told me that, Joe, the second reading stage, the first vote, we've lost that 24-16. And I knew it would have been very hard to win that vote because of the grubby deal that Labor and the Greens had done. But it was still really gut-wrenching to find that out and to think about how to give that news to the crowd that was there, because it just sort of was a massive kind of screw you to everybody there. Labor and the Greens, it's almost like they just they don't even care, that the people are against it. They have the power and they'll wield the power the way they want to use it according to their radical left agenda. And there might have been 10,000 people. And I know in the chamber we were hearing reports, they could hear us so loud and clear, the things that we were chanting and saying. And when we sang the national anthem together as a crowd, which was this beautiful moment of unity, apparently the chamber stopped because they were like, what are they doing now? What's going on? And they were straining to listen to what we were doing. And so we were having this wonderful impact, I think, but the reality is they voted the way they wanted to vote because they're so rusted on pro-abortion. And so when I announced it to the crowd that we'd lost 24-16, I decided to pivot into this being a moment of hope. Because while that was devastating news to know that we hadn't killed the bill at that second reading stage, and we'd had this plan that at one point everybody would hold up a glow stick, which we would distribute it. And if you hadn't got one, because we only bought 2,000 glow sticks, and so we had nowhere near enough. We ran out really quickly. But we had this plan that you could also turn your phone light on, and that was going to symbolise, we were going to get everyone to raise them in the air, and that was going to symbolise the lives lost to abortion. But it was almost like this thing came into my heart of, well, no, let's make this a commitment moment, like almost like an altar call, like I am going to stand up for these babies and I am going to do what it takes to end abortion, and that the people in the parliament, this will be the last crop of pro-abortion politicians passing this kind of law again. And so instead of it being the original plan, we actually switched it to this, and I might just show it to you now. Take a look at this incredible scene from the Parliament on Wednesday night.
I want to do right now, because I asked you, I said, are you willing to stand up? Are you willing to stand up like Monica Dumit, Charlie Bacchus, like men and women who have said, yes, I am going to do my thing. Are you going to do it? Are you going to save these babies?
Yes.
And if you are going to do it, I want you to turn the light on your phone and crack your glow stick and hold it up in the air now as a sign of your commitment to ending abortion in this country. Let this be the last parliament ever to kill babies in this country. This evil ends tonight with us. Does this evil end tonight with you and me, does it? Does it end tonight? Are we going to end abortion in this country? And are we, the answer by the way to the next one is no. Are we ever going to vote Labor again if they pass this bill? Let's do that one more time. Are we ever going to trust Labor again if they pass this bill?
Even though we lost that initial vote, the next step in the second reading stage is to proceed to committee. And so what that means is the Legislative Council almost becomes like a mini committee, and they sit and look at each of the amendments in detail. And I've got my laptop here just to remind me of all of the amendments because there were so many. And I hadn't shared this with you guys in advance because I didn't want the other side to know our strategy. But we did have a view that we were going to try and introduce our own amendments, not only to take out the very bad things in this bill, but to also have a go at trying to capture the agenda and put it on our own terms and actually put good stuff in the bill and use it as a Trojan horse to get pro-life amendments through. So we wanted to take out the bad stuff and we wanted to improve on the status quo. That was our goal. And I didn't tell you guys that in advance because I obviously didn't want the other side to get wind of it. But using my experience as a professor of law, I was working with people around drafting those amendments. And so, on the Wednesday night, the first thing that happened when it proceeded to second reading committee stage was that Labor did another grubby deal with the Greens to force out our most serious pro-life amendments. So John Ruddock, the Libertarian MP, and I had been working together on a couple of amendments. One was to protect babies who survive their abortions, and secondly, to prevent sex-selective abortion. This was a big issue in 2019, if you recall. There was a lot of outrage in the community about the failure of the Parliament then to ban sex-selective abortions. You might be thinking, does this even happen? Do girls get aborted in Australia just because they're girls? Well, there is not just anecdotal evidence, but survey data to suggest that this does happen. There's a La Trobe University study which shows that in certain ethnic communities in Melbourne, in Victoria, 125 boys are being born to 100 girls. So that indicates, because the natural ratio would probably be 100 to 105 or roughly equal. And so to have such a significant distortion does suggest that there is a gender bias. And we know that worldwide there's close to, I think it's 100 million missing girls. And in India, where I'm originally from, there'll be 6 million fewer girls by 2030 because of sex-selective abortion. So it's a real issue, and it is something that needs to be addressed. So John had 2 really good amendments on these, but Labor immediately moved a procedural motion, to prevent him from allowing those to receive debate. They just didn't want this at all. They didn't want to talk about the murky, dark side of their abortion agenda. They didn't want any spotlight on that. And they could see this spiralling out of control if we got our way. So they just shut it right down. And you know how Labor's been talking about, oh, well, abortion's always a conscience vote. Well, they abandoned that then. You know, we really flushed them out and showed their true colours, because when that procedural motion came before the Parliament on the night of the rally, Labor and the Greens voted as a bloc to ensure that those excellent amendments of John Ruddock didn't even get time for parliamentary debate. They just censored it, thwarted our democratic processes. The Liberals afforded a conscience vote. Labor didn't. And it's what I've been telling you time and time again. Labor and Libs, while they both are pro-abortion parties, they're not equal. In the Labor Party, because of the role of Emily's List, check out my video. I keep telling you guys that it's really important you know what's going on in the Labor Party and why it's so pro-abortion. The Labor Party is just so much worse. And so on the night, they bandied together to make sure that John's motions couldn't even be looked at. Let's just watch a little video now of what John has said about what happened.
Mr President, the Libertarian Party amendments are in line with the long title description of this bill. The long title of this bill is an Act to amend the Abortion Law Reform Act 2019 to increase access to abortion health care, including by making further provisions about health practitioners and for related purposes. The key part is at the end, and for related purposes. The amendments of the Libertarian Party are not about agriculture or transport or education. These amendments all relate precisely to the purpose of this bill: expansion of the practice of abortion and using the power of state-sponsored violence to force health practitioners to act contrary to their conscience on the question of abortion. Now, why would the government and their friends want to use parliamentary procedure to prevent debate? They do not like talking about the real-life, messy and horrific details of what is involved with abortion. This particular amendment relates to the vile practice of aborting a baby because the parents want a baby, but they don't like the gender. And for that reason alone, they want to kill the baby. That should be illegal. We should be able to debate it. Now, I accept all of this is uncomfortable, but that concern is outweighed by defenceless innocents in the womb who very much want to be born and live. We were all in the womb one day, Mr President. We're all relieved our mothers chose life and not an abortion. I am on their side. I want to give voice to the voiceless, and the voiceless want this debate to proceed. Parliament is a place of robust debate about contentious issues. I find it odd that the government and its parliamentary friends used their numbers earlier today to lift the hard adjournment and subject this Parliament to a late-night debate, while also trying to stifle our ability to debate these critical amendments. I oppose attempts to prevent debate and urge my colleagues to do likewise.
Now, as you'll see from what John said, the excuse that Labor and the Greens gave is that these amendments of John's were not in the spirit of the bill. But what does that tell you about the spirit of the bill? This means very clearly, like, if the bill is not about dealing with babies who survive their abortion and giving them human rights, or protecting baby girls from being aborted just because they're girls, then this is a bill that is clearly about not saving or protecting babies. It's about killing babies. That's the spirit of the bill, and that's why Labor and the Greens did their grubby deal to block John Ruddock's amendments from even being discussed. So after Labor and the Greens had blocked those amendments, the Parliament recessed, and we didn't come back to this until yesterday. About 5 p.m. was when it kicked off again. And it kicked off again in the amendments, and we started with amendments from Robert Borsak from the Shooters and Fishers and Farmers Parties. And right off the bat, it became clear to me that the tremendous showing of people power that we'd had on the Wednesday night in the rally had had an effect, because the first amendment that he proposed was to gut the proposal by Amanda Conn and the Greens to force Catholic hospitals and faith-based hospitals and any publicly funded hospital to perform abortions. So if you recall, in her bill it said in Schedule 1 that the Minister for Health could give a direction to a public health organisation and they must comply. Now, she had said this was so important because of abortion access, and she said there's all these whistleblower accounts of women being turned away from abortion. All of it's BS, because the reality is you can get a telehealth abortion for $6.80 as a concession card holder. That's how cheap it is to kill your baby. So it's not like there's this crisis in abortion access. These whistleblower accounts are Con, the Greens, academics and left-wing media banding together to create a fake crisis, and I cover that in one of my early YouTube episodes. This is nothing more than a manufactured crisis that they've come up with. And what was amazing was straight away on that First Amendment, we actually had a victory and it went down. So that was incredible. What they do in those moments, and I want to explain this to you guys because we're going to have to get used to this over the coming years as we watch these parliamentary debates. They call for a vote and they do it initially on the voices. So they say, who supports this amendment? And you say aye or you say nay. And they listen for the louder one. And if the voices are really loud on one side and there's clearly no voices on the other side, they'll just call it. But typically what happens is at that moment, someone will say, call for a division. And then the speaker will say, okay, I call for a division, ring the bells. And then they ring the bells for 4 minutes. And that gives everybody time to come through to the upper house chamber because some of the MPs aren't in there while the debate's having taken place. They're just in their offices on phone calls, maybe watching it on the TV in their room. But the minute those bells ring, they have to rush to the chamber, and after 4 minutes, the speaker says, lock the doors. And if you haven't actually seated on either the yes side or the no side, your vote doesn't get counted. So when they called for a division on that First Amendment, it became really clear actually how lonely Amanda Con's side was and how successful our campaign had been, because we killed that provision of the bill and we successfully passed Robert Borsak's Amendment 28 to 11, which was incredible. So that was a massive high from last night, just seeing straight away the effect that our campaign has had, because you have to remember none of this was assured at all. When this bill was introduced, it was very clear that Con had been working with Ryan Parks, the Labor Minister, and that deals had been done, discussions had been had, and it was assumed, I think, that this bill would sail through Parliament. My understanding was they were going to debate it on March 25 and then get it in the lower house the following week and just have it all done and dusted by the election. But when we held our rally in March 25, we delayed them by a week and we pushed out that time frame, and they actually had to scramble and didn't know what they were going to do. So we stopped them from passing this whole thing in full, and that's an incredible achievement that we've been able to do that. The next thing that happened though was we went from this massive high to this almighty low, and I had been predicting this because I knew that Labor, my sources told me, were very rusted on to the idea of turning nurses and midwives into killers. So the next amendment that they discussed was about removing, the Shooters Fishers Party proposed an amendment that would have removed the provision that allowed nurses and midwives to prescribe abortion drugs, RU486, MS2-step. There's lots of different names for this. And in Amanda Con's bill, it said up to 22 weeks. So this was, I think, the most dangerous part of the bill, because it fundamentally transforms those professions of nursing and midwifery. And I've had so many health workers reach out to me to tell me this is just something that they cannot stomach, they cannot balk, they do not want to do it. Susan Carter read into the transcript emails she'd received from an obstetrician of over 30 years saying, we cannot let this pass. Midwives from a major public hospital, a quarter, were threatening to walk out if this one passed. And that's one reason why it's terribly bad. But the other reason is that it will kill the most babies, because abortion pills, being the cheapest DIY type of abortion drug that there is, abortion method that there is, they're obviously really easy to get into the community. And this is the easiest and cheapest and quickest way to kill your baby. It's also the most dangerous. The complication rate in South Australia, where I'm from, is 6% compared to a surgical abortion, which is 1%. So it's fundamentally dangerous for the baby because they die, but it is also dangerous for women. And a study that has just come out of the US that looked at 800,000 women who have had abortions using these drugs, the complication rate was actually 1 in 9. So it was really significant. Serious adverse events like hemorrhaging and bleeding out, needing an emergency blood transfusion, having to go to the hospital to get emergency care to save the woman's life because of retained products of conception. So it is actually really serious, but none of that mattered in the Parliament because Labor is really, I think there's no other way of saying it, Labor is in the business of killing babies. It just is. And so when it came to this amendment, and this is the thing they really wanted to get through, they got that amendment through. And so that remains in the bill. That was heartbreaking, and I don't know what else to say. The third thing that happened, the next amendment, was the one about doctors having to actively transfer to another person who they reasonably believe will carry out the abortion. Now, I've told you guys, this is like forcing a doctor to call Dr. Death and to arrange the hit job on that child. So Amanda Conn sees no problem with this. As she told the Parliament last night, she's like, this is not overriding conscientious objection. This is just actually meeting a doctor's obligation to do no harm. How twisted is that? How twisted that in her mind, to meet the Hippocratic Oath, a doctor has to call another doctor to order and arrange for the child in utero to be killed. I mean, that is a complete subversion of the Hippocratic Oath, which says do no harm. And yet that's what she told the Parliament last night. She's an abortionist. She's told the Parliament previously that she finds being an abortionist an experience of joy and empowerment. It's a really sick mentality. I can't get my head around it. But thankfully, we won that one too, overwhelmingly as well. It started to get pretty lonely on Amanda Conn's side of the chamber, because when they called that on the voices, it was clear we were going to win. Then they called for a division, and again, we won that really significantly. So now doctors can breathe a sigh of relief that they don't have to actively transfer and arrange the abortion and thus become morally complicit. The fourth amendment that we managed to get up was one around data keeping. So Amanda Conn and the Greens wanted to remove the very, very lightweight data keeping requirement that currently exists in the Abortion Law Reform Act of 2019. There's just 4 little questions that once you've done an abortion, you have to fill out. And Amanda Conn and the Greens said, oh, this is too onerous, this is too difficult for doctors, it's impeding access. It was just such a BS position to take, and what it spoke to was their desire to cover up what's really going on and to have no accountability and transparency around this very serious issue. That one lost in an overwhelming majority. That was epic. So all of these big losses that she was having and that we were winning was a testament to the campaign that we've run, the emails, the calls, the meeting with MPs, the letterboxing. It's been relentless and huge and exhausting and a roller coaster, but the rally culminating in that, all of this was why she lost 3 out of the 4 flagship aspects of her bill, and why we won quite significantly on those really terrifying aspects of her bill. And then a surprise happened just towards the end of the night. So Robert Borsak from Shooters, Fishers and Farmers, I hope I'm getting that right, I'm so tired, he proposed an amendment that there should be an annual report to Parliament that details, waiting times for abortion, access issues, but also crucially adverse events and numbers and rates of abortions in different places. Now, there was a lot of debate back and forth on this, and what was interesting is I noticed a bit of a division starting to take place within the Labor Party because although they'd pretty much stitched it up so that they knew which way the votes were going to go on all of them, I noticed Dr. Sarah Kane, who's a former academic, I've known her actually because we research in a similar area, so before she went into politics, I'm quite familiar with her, but she got up and to her credit, she said, look guys, I actually think this annual report is a very good idea. Data is really important. Now, she is coming from a pro-abortion perspective, but she did say, I think data is really important. And then when Amanda Conn who got up and said, oh, no, we hate data, we don't want data. That's not exactly what she said, but she essentially said, I'm not voting for this annual report because why would she want more scrutiny? Sarah Kane got up again and she said, guys, data is really important. And so then they called that on the voices, and that was a really close call. And then they rang the bells. And in the chamber, in the gallery where we were, there was a whole group of us who were just, waiting with bated breath throughout this night on tenterhooks. And we were just so deeply invested in this outcome. And then they rang the bells, and there was a lovely young woman sitting behind me called Jordan. I hope you don't mind me saying your name if you're watching, but she was sitting there, beautiful young woman who I'd never been met before, couldn't make it to the rally because she'd had to work late, but she was there watching the parliamentary proceedings live. And I turned around to her and I said, look, the numbers look really equal on both sides. Can you do the counting? And so she was furiously counting how many on the yeses, how many on the noes as these bells are ringing. And at the very last moment, just as they were about to lock the doors, Natalie Ward, who's pro-abortion, ran into the chamber, and then the speaker said, "Lock the doors." And she was behind the red rope. So even though she'd gotten into the chamber, she wasn't able to go and sit with the pro-abortion side who didn't want the annual report. And then they counted, and it takes ages for them to count, and you're just waiting for this to happen. But we won that one 21-19. So even if Natalie Ward had made it, actually, if she'd made it, that would have made it 2020 and the speaker would have had the deciding vote. And I don't know where he would have gone. But we actually got that amendment through. So to me, that was a silver lining and a portent of things to come. The fact that our strategy to try and improve the status quo, we didn't get anywhere close to what we would have liked to get there, but we did get something through. And that was really exciting. Greater accountability and scrutiny on what's going on in abortions, because there's no annual reporting at the moment. We literally don't know how many babies have been killed right up until birth in New South Wales since they introduced it in 2019. We don't know about the health effects on women because they're not reporting adverse events. Now, in South Australia, where I'm from, they do report all of this. They anonymise the data so you can't tell who it's about, which is, I think, the right thing to do. But you can see that 80% of late-term abortions kill healthy babies in non-emergency situations. 0 late-term abortions have been to save the life of the mother because it's not medically necessary. We have that data from South Australia, but in New South Wales, no idea because they haven't been releasing it. So all of this to summarise now to say we've managed to gut 3 out of 4 elements of a very bad bill. We've actually improved on something by getting in a new amendment. So what this means is the bill will now proceed to the lower house. And I understand that Labor wants to get this done and dusted by Tuesday. They know it's electorally toxic for them. They're hoping we're going to forget about it. The bill that goes to on Tuesday to the lower house is now a bill that just has 2 things in it. It turns nurses and midwives into abortionists, and it requires an annual report on abortions in New South Wales. So it's just got those 2 things. One of those things we like, one of those things we absolutely hate. And so I'm asking everybody urgently to call, email and visit your MP. And you don't have a lot of time because this is going to happen on Tuesday. But I particularly need you to call Labor because they are the party of government and they have the numbers to defeat this. And if Labor moved as a bloc, this just wouldn't pass. So I'm particularly still focusing on that, but I would like you to call everybody in the lower house. And the message you give them is if you don't block this, if you don't block nurses and midwives turning into abortionists, then we just cannot vote for you. I just cannot vote for you. And I think that's the message they need to hear loud and clear. And so the final thing I want to say is win or lose on Tuesday, we have had a tremendous victory here. The absolute high point was the rally on Wednesday night. That was a turning point moment for our movement and for this country. I really believe that in my bones, that there were people there that night who are going to work with me and you to end abortion. The young woman that I mentioned before who was sitting in the parliament last night, she was in tears watching it in the chamber, and as we exited, she was in tears. And there's just such a stark contrast between the cavalier, relaxed, casual attitude of these pro-abortion politicians that we'd been watching all night, who were just joking and laughing around, blissfully unaware or deliberately ignorant of the tens of thousands of babies that are now going to be brutally killed because of their decision to turn nurses and midwives into abortionists. And this young woman was totally moved to tears by this. And it reminded me of my own watershed moment in 2021. Sorry, I'm going to cry now. Okay, get it together, Joe. In 2021, I watched the South Australian Parliament debate and then vote abortion up to birth. And in my state where I lived, and I never thought that would happen. I didn't think that that would be possible in my state. And yet it did happen. And when I saw it happen, I caught the train home back to where I live. It's like a 40-minute journey. And I cried the entire way because I just knew that this is something that it's a watershed moment. You can't not speak up and fight with your entire being if this is what they're going to do to our babies. And so I knew in that moment that my whole life was going to change. And I didn't know how or when or what it would look like. I had no idea that I'd be here 3.5 years later doing this kind of work. But I knew that I just could not look away again, that if I did that, then who would I become and where would our country be? And so I felt like the young woman sitting behind me was having that moment last night, and I've been inundated by messages from people who attended the rallies saying that they too have had that conversion moment. And so I know that win or lose on Tuesday, we have won, because we are going to win and we're going to get there. Like, I just know that. I know that we're going to protect these babies and we're going to end abortion. And I think for me, if we lose on Tuesday, I'm going to take a few days off, but then I'm going to come back to you guys with an aggressive marginal seats campaign in New South Wales. This is something we've not tried before, and it's something I want to work with you guys, and I'm going to need your support. I really am going to need it, because I cannot do it alone. For a start, I live in South Australia, so I'm going to be recruiting team captains in New South Wales to lead particular electorates. We're going to pick the electorates that where we think we can make the most difference, and we're going to campaign for 20 months. We're going to teach ourselves to door knock. We already know how to letterbox. We're going to run faith leader forums, community events. We are actually going to work our butts off to make sure that those Labor MPs lose their seats, because the reality is this. If Chris Minns at the start of the year had said, this is a private member's bill, we're not going to touch it, Labor's going to block it. And he could have done that, because that's exactly what his counterpart in Victoria did, Jacinta Allens, when they had a radical Greens abortion bill. She blocked it. She said, we're not touching it, we're not having a conscience vote. And as a result, that bill will never see the light of day. The Greens bill to constitutionalise the right to abortion will never see the light of day in Victoria. Chris Minns did not do that in New South Wales. And we want to make that the reason why he never gets to be Premier again. Like, we actually have to be that serious about these babies. We have to actually really believe that this is the biggest evil, because if we believed it, like I believe it in my fibre, like every bone in me knows how monstrously evil this is, then everything we have to do is to end it peacefully but powerfully. Everything that we do from this point in, if we lose on Tuesday, is to make sure that Labor is held to account, because that's the only language that they understand. Okay, this was a big show, a lot to unpack. Thank you for sticking with it. Tell me what you think in the comments. I am flying back home today. I'm really excited to go see the kids, because it has been 3 nights away. My husband flew back yesterday because we felt that they at least needed one parent, because it is a sacrifice for them. It's a sacrifice for our family. But I'm looking forward to getting back home and giving them a big hug. Thank you for all your support this week. We are making progress, and that's today on the Dr. Jo Show.